There are a couple of major things that really sort of get me up in the morning. And part of it has to do with the fact that our firm does almost all public work. And as a result, almost every one of our projects has a lot of connections with the community. That gives meaning to what it is that we do. It's not just designing, a fancy house for a rich person, which is kind of a really fun design task, but it's not the design task that I aspire to. I aspire to sort of doing something that really works for a lot of people and makes people's lives better. And that way I end up feeling like I've done something really good in the world.
We have a great guest on. We have with us Chris Noll, Noll Tam Architects, and Chris is a named partner and started this firm in 1992. And it's grown to what? How many architects now, Chris?
We're just over 40 now.
Just over 40. Great size firm. So Chris has agreed to sit down with us and share a little bit about his story and take some time for the foundation. So thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Not at all. So anyway, it took me a while to get into architecture, I guess, and I sort of grew up on the East Coast. I went to college. I had no idea what I was going to do. When I got to college, I had all these different interests. And in my sophomore year, I just stumbled into an architecture course. It was kind of an introductory survey, and kaboom, the light went off. And I said, wow, this sort of melds together all of those different interests that I have in my brain and things I'm interested in. It has to do with science and mathematics, but also art and culture and things like that. So, it just sort of really seemed to fit. So it's one of those sort of aha moments in my life when I did that. So, that's how I ended up in architecture accidentally.
I like it. Were you somebody who was kind of like a sketcher, or somebody who found yourself as kind of drawing things? Would you describe yourself that way?
I drew like crazy when I was a kid.
Okay.
And the stuff that I drew often were sort of buildings or structures or, environments and things like that. So, I had a vast imagination, and I think, both of my sons, one in particular, is doing the same thing. So I have a feeling he might end up in architecture too, from the way he's going.
I love it. Most of the folks that I talk to, there was some type of design professional in their family, not necessarily an architect to an architect. Sometimes it was an engineer to an architect, or vice versa. But oftentimes there was somebody in their life who had kind of shown them the path a little bit. And I have to imagine that trickles down as well. If you've got kids, that it would be the same. So
yeah. There was nobody in my life that gave me any indication that architecture would be an option, or
Okay.
even a profession. I really wasn't aware of it until I kind of stumbled into it. I knew it existed, but now I'm married into a family with a bunch of other architects. So,
I love it. All architects all the time.
Yeah.
So for our students here at the foundation, can you talk a little bit about kind of your day-to-day, like what's one of the favorite parts of your job, or what do you get the most fulfillment out of on a regular basis?
Well, I think it comes down, there are a couple of major things that really sort of get me up in the morning. And part of it has to do with the fact that our firm does almost all public work. And as a result, almost every one of our projects has a lot of connections with the community. And I think that is one of the things that really stimulates me and gets me going, is that kind of outreach to people in the community around, what we're doing with our projects. It's sort of client contact, but then beyond the clients, dealing with the building users and sort of people in the general community, trying to figure out what it is they want. And that, to me, is really interesting and really fun and really stimulating, because you get to the end of the day and in the work that you're doing, and you're creating something that's really going to benefit a lot of people's lives. And that gives meaning to what it is that we do. It's not just designing, a fancy house for a rich person, which is kind of a really fun design task, but it's not the design task that I aspire to. I aspire to sort of doing something that really works for a lot of people and makes people's lives better. And that way I end up feeling like I've done something really good in the world. And
Yeah.
it just makes me happy. The other thing is just design. I just love design, and we are very committed, to having a collaborative design process. We don't believe in the black cape architect model. We're not Frank Lloyd. I'm not Frank Lloyd Wright or Mies van der Rohe or Frank Gehry. I am somebody who works with other people, and that is really fun. That is great because people bring so many great ideas, and it's not just my staff. It also is, are our clients and sort of general people in the community. As we're having design presentations and people come up with ideas, our clients come up with ideas. It's really fun to bring all that together. And one of
Right.
my old mentors, was Charles Moore. And I worked with Charles Moore, and basically all of his partners from MLTW. I think I've worked with them all over the years. But Charles was great at bringing in anybody's idea, no matter how crazy a comment was or a suggestion was. He would just jump on it and say, "Yeah, we can do that." And we always thought he was crazy, but in the end, now I'm realizing, it's not crazy. It's great. You can sort of take great ideas and you can make them work. And so those
Right.
are the two things, working with people and, having fun with design are the two things that kind of make me motivated.
I love it. Can you talk a little bit more about that? It says I'm hearing that a little bit, especially from firms who very much kind of fancy themselves as having great culture, right? And having
Mhm.
a lot of I'll use the word buy-in. It's not the best word, but let's just say the opposite of that would be hiring a young architect, sticking them in the corner and say, "Hey, you need to put in your time. I don't want to hear from you until you've reached this milestone number of years worked or whatnot." What sounds like it really works well is if everybody has a voice and in some degree, right? I mean, obviously you don't have the experience yet. Can you talk a little bit about that at your firm and kind of how that works?
Well, Noll Tam is an interesting firm, and I'm really proud to sort of be part of it, and to have sort of brought it to where it is right now. We put a huge amount of effort into our firm culture. We really believe in creating a culture of diversity and equity and collaboration within the firm. So it's very flatly organized. We have principals and senior project managers and staff, but it's really very much like a big family where everybody works together. People kind of work in different roles depending upon kind of their experience and what they can contribute to a project. It isn't necessarily like a senior person is always in charge. It could be a junior person in charge with a senior person helping them. But we believe in collaborative design and bringing everybody's opinions to it. We sort of treat everybody as well as we can. We have people that stay with us for a very long time, and I think that's sort of part of it. I don't want to sort of do a show and tell on Noll Tam and how
That's
great we
okay.
are, but we are pretty great,
Yeah.
and we're also unusually for the profession about 2/3 women, so
Really?
it is just something that has happened over the years of us choosing what we felt were the best candidates for our firm, and we've ended up at 65% women in the firm now, and women in leadership positions as well. So
Right.
that's sort of kind of how our firm works, and our commitment to culture has been challenged during the COVID crisis, where we're all now working from home,
Right.
and so we spend a lot of time in these huge Zoom meetings where everybody's there, and we're going over stuff, and we're talking about what we're doing. We're sort of the entire firm is participating in an 8-week diversity, equity, inclusion, workshop with this sort of great company called Pathways to Equity, and we're just we hang together. Digitally now, virtually,
Yeah.
but in when we're back in sort of the office, we spend a lot of time together, getting to know each other, and
Right.
it's a very friendly place. Yeah.
Genders, races across the board, just making sure that if somebody was a middle school or high school student and was looking at a career in design, that somebody that looks like them has done this before them, right? And it is possible for them, right? Whatever your circumstances, it is possible. I think that's a really important message, and it sounds like you guys are very in line with that.
Yeah, I mean, what's possible is, it can be a real challenge for a lot of people, number one, to just conceptualize of it, but also to make it work, And I think one of our sort of renewed commitments this year has been to even sort of up the ante in terms of our outreach and towards diversity. And
Mhm.
we've been reading and talking among ourselves a lot about, what are the barriers to
Mhm.
people, diversity, getting more diversity in the profession, which is not very diverse, both women as well as people of color.
Mhm.
And what are those barriers to people, and what can we do to kind of help erase those barriers? And so we're thinking
Right.
of a lot of different ideas. Not, yes, we are looking to hire people of color, but we're also looking to help mentor people, who
Right.
are thinking about entering the profession and are kind of looking at this thing, wondering, well, what is architecture? Is that really for me? And am I going to be happy there in the long run? How, what's it going to take to make this work, for any individual person? And what are the barriers? And are there barriers that we can help them get across?
Right.
And so we're sort of trying to do more outreach now into both community colleges and for hiring, as well as sort of looking down into even the high school levels and seeing if there's things we can do in terms of outreach, that might be able to help mentor people or support people,
Mhm.
financially, or sort of just, really kind of giving people a perspective about what they're, what the profession might mean to them, whether it's a good fit for them, and what are the things they're going to have to do, along the way to get to where, we are.
Right. I love it. I love it. Sounds like those are great efforts. Um, if we switch gears a little bit, what would be something that you might say would be the hardest part of your journey professionally, either, as a designer yourself, or in terms of being a firm owner and kind of that process?
Um, there are a ton of challenges along the way. Architecture is a tricky profession, and it doesn't come easy. You got to work really hard. I mean, you start working really hard in school. That's where people initially get the sense of, how do architects do it? And then they're up all nighters in school. And that was the way it worked in my days. And I hear it's pretty much the same. People really throw their all into it. But that's part of, I think, the commitment that people make to jumping in. And that's not for everybody. And sometimes I worry that it's too hard for a lot of people, that we make the bar too high, that you have to kill yourself in school to get here. It's like, and then you have to kill yourself once you're in the profession. Um, I think what we try to do at Noll Tam is at least to make the workplace a sustainable place to be.
Mhm.
But I think that is, kind of the hardest part, is kind of this getting through the whole,
Yeah.
the sort of the process of getting here.
Right. And that's an interesting, we see this sometimes, right? It is so hard to become a licensed architect, right? Here in the state of California, it requires many exams, it requires many years, it requires lots and lots and lots of studying. And then once you do that, once you achieve that, now you're still low person on the totem pole, and you have this
Mhm.
lifelong endeavor ahead of you, right? And it
I
can
know.
be
Then they put you,
like,
but you think you finally got there. They put you designing, stair details for a year or something like that. So,
right.
I think, try to find, what you need to do is you need to find your way through the profession that has fulfilling work. I think
Right.
that's one of the hardest parts of once you get into it.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the process behind opening up your practice and kind of what that looked like and what that entailed?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I guess I'm a person, I guess, in terms of sort of my character, that always knew that I wanted to have my own firm. Way back when, I just felt, I just want to have my own firm. I really like that idea. I had a lot of people that I admired that had founded their own firms, and I knew that I was going to have to learn the ropes. And so my career path was to, get through graduate school. I worked a lot during undergraduate and graduate school because I kind of had to support myself. And so I learned practical, office experience along the way. And then once I got my degree from Berkeley, I worked for about 10 years in a sort of a sequence of sort of design-oriented architecture firms, and spent about 10 years doing that. But before I left graduate school, I had made this compact with two of my other friends that we were going to form a firm somewhere down the road together. And so we all decided we had to get some some experience before we did that, because we really wanted to do it. And so all three of us worked at other firms for about 10 years, and then we all got back together again at a fateful dinner in about 1990, I guess, somewhere around there. And we said, "Are we still up for this?" And two of us were. The third one actually was the breadwinner for her household, and her husband had just started his own practice, architecture practice, and so she said, "Well, I have to be the responsible one here. He's not making any money," because that is kind of what happens. Is you don't make any money for a little while.
Right.
But through this 10 years of working, my partner Janet and I both worked for sort of really premier design firms in the Bay Area. BSA, Turnbull for me, Esherick for her, Ratcliffe, so firms that really cared about design and larger projects. And so one of the things we said when we said, okay, we're going to do this thing, is that we're going to do public work. We don't want to do houses. We don't want to do kitchen remodels and garage remodels and things like that. We want to do public buildings that have a real design sense to them. And so we started out by just establishing the firm with that philosophy to it, and also a bunch of other kind of criteria that we use, such as that we wanted a balanced work-life balance in our lives. So that we both had young kids at the time. And so we also said, we're not going to kill ourselves doing this thing if we can possibly help it. And so we established the practice on that basis. During the 10 years of each of us working, we learned a lot about how to do projects, how to design projects. I think one of the key things that I learned when I was at Turnbull's, which was my last job, was I was the marketing director there for a couple of years at the end. And I was an architect, and I said, well, I'll do marketing because our marketing person left. And I said, I'll do marketing as long as I can continue to be an architect at least half time, because I don't want to lose that. But I did enjoy marketing, and boy, did that help me. I think, when I started my own firm, I knew how to fill out, the federal Form 330s and to go after the public work, it's a very competitive process. And so I learned about the competitive process. So I think one of my recommendations for anybody who is interested in starting their own practice, would be to use that time wisely when you're working for other firms to gather the input, or sort of the skills that you're going to need to start your own practice. Because I'll tell you what, they don't teach them all to you in school. You go through graduate school and you'll learn about design and design philosophy. And, if you choose your, subjects carefully, you might learn about, drafting. You might learn about some structural engineering and some other things along the way. But they don't teach you anything about how to run a business.
Right.
They don't teach you anything about legal liabilities and how not to get sued. They don't, it's like you get very little information about starting a practice. And so a lot of people just stay in firms because somebody else is taking care of all that stuff. If you're going to do your own thing, you got to learn it. And so, that little bit that I had at Turnbull's of learning how to do marketing, for public projects, was incredibly valuable to us, and once I got my own firm, I had to learn how to do the books. I was doing my own books for a few years before I yet could afford to hire an accountant to help us. So, it's a little tricky starting your own practice, but once we did it, we committed to it. We started, our first job was at UC Berkeley. We got a little job remodeling a part of a Doe library at UC Berkeley. We put a project in. I'd done some libraries and I loved libraries. And so we put a proposal in for the Rockridge Library, the new Rockridge Library, which was out for RFP. We almost got it. We were like that close from getting it. And we lost it out to a firm that had huge amount of experience in doing libraries. And I'm not surprised they chose them instead of us. But surprise for me was that we got so close to actually getting it when we didn't even have an address yet. Don't be too shy about, chasing the things that you really want to do.
Right.
And that's what we did. And then, one thing led to another, and, you don't make any money for a year or two because you just don't have enough there to do it. So you need to figure out how to get through those first few years. But then once you start getting on a roll, then you start hiring people and you start making a little bit of money. Guess the thing about architecture is it's always a little bit of money. It's not a lot of money. That's the other thing you always need to be careful of is, don't get your expectations too high that this is a highly remunerative profession. It's just not. You're in it because you love it.
Right.
But you can make a decent living at it if you are careful and wise about what you do.
Right. Gosh, so many great things to unpack there. I love it. That was a lot.
I know. So I'm throwing it all at you.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
You were talking a little bit about kind of projects. Is there a project that stands out in your mind as either kind of a most challenging project or something that just had a huge lessons learned on, right? Just something that kind of really stuck with you?
Well, one of the things about this business and kind of my approach to it is that I learn something new every day. So every project is a challenge. Everyone has different challenges, and everyone throws a curveball or 3 or 10 at you that you didn't see coming, and you had to really kind of scramble and learn something. So I find that even the projects that go smoothly are a challenge, and some of them are quite difficult. I think a recent project that we did was the Half Moon Bay Library. And it's a 22,000 square foot new library that replaced an old library in Half Moon Bay. And when we came into that project, the community was divided. There was a political faction in the community that was all about, couldn't ever quite put our finger on what they were. We call them sort of like Tea Party environmentalists or something like that. They were anti-tax. They were trying to gain control of the city council. They were using the library as a political football, and they were trying to stop the library, and because they didn't want to spend the money that they had. And so our challenge in that one was to go in there and try to get everybody on the same page. And so we had this really involved, interestingly designed community process where we had a ton of community meetings, where we strategize, well, how do we bring these people to the table, and how do we diffuse the kind of the anger and the anger and the aggressiveness and the obstructionism, and basically convince them that this is actually something that they and everybody else wants in this community.
Right.
And so we had this really interesting community process that went on for about 4 months. We had a ton of meetings, a lot of people. We designed them to break things up so that people couldn't sort of get together in blocks and kind of hijack the meeting. And we sort of talked it through, and from real practical things and what the value to the community was. And by the time we got to the end of that process, everybody was on board. We had a unanimous vote at the city council, including the 2 different factions. Everybody was supporting this library. And that to me was a huge challenge, because the whole thing could so easily have gotten derailed for any number of different reasons.
Right.
We had to find, and it wasn't just kind of the political support. It also had to do with the design.
Right.
It had to do with the size of the building, kind of making some concessions and saying, well, how can we make this building smaller so it's going to cost less? Okay, so then the anti-tax people were happy because they had a 10% reduction in the budget. But we could still do all the things that we wanted to do. So we had to be really clever about the design. And then the design had to fit into this small scale laid back beach community, and the previous sort of renderings that had been done kind of in a feasibility study had this kind of big, tall, glassy thing, and everybody hated it. And so we had to kind of really work hard with everybody from a design point of view to get them on board. So people cared about the design so much. A lot of places, people don't pay too much attention to it, but in this case, it was a really big deal. So the community involvement process, it was all around design and taking in ideas and finding a solution that kind of really fit in that little town, that small scale, and the kind of materials that they wanted to see.
Right. Oh, have you ever watched the TV show How I Met Your Mother? Do you know that show at all?
No, I haven't.
A little older show.
Uh-huh.
One of the main characters, Ted Mosby, was an architect on the show, and like partway through, they showed a lot of unrealistic things, like him in the 2010 sitting over a drafting table. But one of the examples they used, he went and opened up his own firm in the show, and his story was he was scared. He was a sole proprietor architect, which a lot of architects at one point in their career try to be.
Oh yeah.
And his story was about an architect who built a library This gorgeous library, beautiful columns, just looked exactly the way they wanted it to. But structurally, he hadn't accounted for the books, the weight of the books. And so that was his big question on the show was, what about the books, right? There's nobody, and his fear in that was there's nobody looking over my shoulder to remind me about the fact that, I needed kind of a second opinion and collaboration on this. And when I just heard your story on libraries, that was all that was in my head. I was like, oh man, you guys are living it. You're literally designing these things on a regular basis, and all of the things that come along with this, right? In terms of getting everybody else on board with the design. Oh, amazing.
Reminds me of a story. I was talking to somebody this morning that it was a librarian, and one of his first jobs was going into a building that wasn't designed to be a library, and they had to reinforce the building to support the books.
Yeah, I believe it. Actually, ironically enough, my dad went to Cal and he worked in the library. He was a math major for some reason. I don't know why, but he worked in the library. That was his job through college. Was working in the library there in the early '80s at Cal. So.
Fantastic.
That was the same library that you were just talking about, right?
What's he in the Doe Library?
Is it? Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh man, I'll have to tell him that. Are there any leaders in architecture that you admire or have inspired you in some way?
God, there's so many people that I kind of have a debt of gratitude for. A lot of my bosses, people like, Henrik Bull, Bill Turnbull, Charles Moore, are all people that I really kind of hold a lot of, faith towards. And they were all kind of brilliant people, brilliant architects in their own rights, but sort of lovely people. And, nobody took themselves too seriously. And I think that's one of the things I like about, people in architecture is try not to take yourself too seriously.
Right.
Architects have a really bad habit of thinking that they're somehow they're gods.
Right. Starchitects, right? That's the term I've heard.
Yeah.
Starchitects.
Yeah. And somebody as famous as Charles Moore, was the most humble person, you could imagine. Those are the people. And Don Linden was one of my mentors at Berkeley.
Yeah.
And he was another one of the MLTW crew. So it's funny, I have a very close connection with them. But I think what that group of architects did was they had this kind of really cohesive sense of architecture and landscape and sense of place. And sort of a collaborative approach to design, which are all things that I carry with me now. And I think they're really central to my sort of design philosophy and how I want to practice.
All right. Well, our last question we always end on is what is the best advice that you could give to an up-and-coming design professional? Either something that you wish you had learned or somebody had told you along the way, or just when your experience now, having practiced for over 30 plus years, what do you wish the younger designers knew?
If these are people who are sort of thinking about joining the profession, then I would say learn more about it, and don't be intimidated by it. It is possible to do, and I think that there are ways for people to get into it. If you have a hankering for design, and this is something that you really like to do, then go for it. I mean, that's kind of what I feel like, and find the mentors and find the people who would support you. I know the hurdles are really big to get into the profession. It is not designed to make it easy for people to enter the profession. And, for some people, it's who come from more privileged backgrounds, it's easier. But for people who are not coming from privileged backgrounds, they can look at architecture and wonder, well, why would I want to do that? And I think, encouraging people to have an open mind about it and look for somebody to help guide them.
Right.
Go take a temporary job, a summer job or something as an intern in an architecture office, even if you're just doing admin work, and learn what it's like. Or take some courses, in a community college or some kind of extension program or something like that to try it out. That's kind of, from an emerging design professional, that's what I would say. If the question is about, kind of whether to sort of form your own firm or something like that, then those are much more complicated questions that have to go down to
Right.
sort of your core values and kind of what drives you in the profession.
Right.
And again, I think mentorship is really key, finding somebody to talk to about it who's been there, and can sort of, help guide you through. Those are really big life decisions.
Right.
But I think in the end, they can be just fantastic. And I know that it's people are driven to do this profession, and some people there's no choice. They say there's no choice. This is my life, and I'm going to do it no matter what. So, but there are others who aren't quite sure about that, and I think let's find the right path for you if we can.
Right. That's 100%. You hit the nail on the head with the mentorship. And that's something the foundation believes very deeply. And it's how this whole interview series started. It's obviously something that you guys believe in at Noll and Tam. A good mentor, if you're on the fence, if you're considering your options, right, a good mentor can help you figure out what's right for you. Right. And that it doesn't matter what that is, right? It just matters that you figure it out for you. So
yeah.
Awesome, Chris. Well, that's a great place for us to leave it. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was absolutely excellent. We really, really appreciate you and your expertise.